Let's bring in Taylor Riggs, co-host of The Big Money Show, right here on Fabulous Fox Business, and John Carney, Breitbart News and co-author of the daily Breitbart Business Digest. Thanks to both of you for coming on. Here it is. Federal Reserve blows a $2.5 billion. I'm just reading the tear sheet headline from the New York Post. $2.5 billion on a Palace of Versailles headquarters, despite mounting losses. Congress must put its foot down. John Carney, I appeal to you. Who will put their foot down? And it's an ugly building. Wait till you see the building. It's just a nothing burger, typical modernistic glass building. Not even a single column to be. At least the McChesney Martin building across the street had a nice columnar entryway, if that's the right word. Columnar. I don't know. I'm back from vacation. I can't hardly talk. What do you think, John?
So they estimate that the actual Palace of Versailles would cost $5 billion.
Really?
And it's beautiful. It is a beautiful building. $5 billion is what it would cost to pay today. It does not look anything like that. At least if you're going to spend $2.5 billion, make it a big, beautiful building. Donald Trump should give them a call. He knows about building. He should call them up and say, guys, why are you building this Soviet-style block building and not something that the public can look at as a treasure for itself?
Taylor, I appeal to your aesthetic senses about this.
Let's do it. We talked to Kevin O'Leary on it, and he's a huge fan about getting the private sector. He's like, they should have called me. We would have taken private sector bids for it. I'd put a restaurant in the lobby called Eat with the Fed, Dine with the Fed. You could sit next to a chart of M2 Money Supply.
You could turn the dials yourself.
Yeah, exactly. On and off, right? How you want to think about QE versus QT. And so in all seriousness, I think just sort of the frustrations are, did I read a private elevator for Federal Reserve officials? Okay, they might need that for security, blah, blah, blah. But it's just more the optics of it, I think, where people are thinking, wait a minute, we're all sort of struggling.
At a time of Doge in Washington, D.C.
And I think it's over budget and overrun. And so I think people are thinking, wait a minute, is this what we need at this moment?
3,000? Did I read 3,000 people? I didn't know they were up to 3,000 people head count. Boy, what are they doing with three? And by the way, they're terrible bond managers because they're losing money every year. Yeah, in other words, this money will eventually come out of the taxpayers' hide because they're losing money. They're not handing profits over to the Treasury anymore because their bond portfolio is underwater.
That's right. So Congress doesn't get to appropriate money for the Fed. That's why they were able to spend $2.5 billion. If they had to go to Congress to ask permission to spend this kind of money, they wouldn't get it. They're able to do it because they have this massive bond portfolio that they've lost over $200 billion in the last 2 years on. This adds to their losses because their operating expenses are paid for by the Fed's own bond portfolio. When it makes money eventually, and it will probably someday, they'll be paying that over to the taxpayer. This is less money that will be paid to taxpayers.
The only argument for the building, if you want to let me stir the pot for pot's sake, we want to be really proud of our institutions. I think a lot of people out there still believe the Federal Reserve is the central bank of the world. The dollar is the reserve currency of the world. We want to have a building that's really proud that people can go to in D.C.
Like that one?
So there's your point.
The concept isn't bad, Taylor. It's the, by the way, maybe they could stop building it for a while. Maybe they could share it with other places. So it's like Soviets broke up these mansions into little apartments.
It would be amazing if they put Doge in there. Just let Doge have a big section of that building and be like, hey, guys, thanks for building the HQ.
Taylor Riggs, you know about basketball?
Oh,
the referees.
Let's try it.
Have you ever seen the coaches work the referees?
Okay.
On the sideline, they work the referees.
I've seen that in some football.
And football.
Yes,
okay.
yes,
So that's what Donald Trump's doing to J-Powell right now.
Trying to work the referee.
He's working the ref. And it's going to pay off because when they're going to cut interest rates, the Fed?
So, wow, if I knew when they were going to cut interest rates, Larry, I wouldn't be here on this program. I'd be on my own yacht.
Yes, you would. You'd be right here.
Right here.
You'd be right here.
Here's the frustration, I think, and John can disagree with me if he wants. People viewed that jumbo interest rate cut last September, weeks before the election, as political. Now that the Fed, for now, has said they aren't cutting, maybe June, we'll see. A lot of people are thinking, wait a minute, you told me that you were independent. It didn't feel that way. Even though the Fed will still admit that they are independent, it doesn't feel that way to the American people. That's where the frustration is. 10-year Treasury yield today back down to a 4.23, I believe it is. So we're back below 4.25.
Stock's going back up.
But again, I would go out on a limb here and say that even if the Fed doesn't cut, the bond market's playing chicken with them. They can cut and yields will still rise. So it's up to the bond market, maybe not so much Jay Powell, but maybe more of a Scott Bessent to decide where the yields go from here.
Last word, John.
So Chris
Working
Waller gave a great interview last week in which he said that they're most likely to have to cut because of tariffs. Tariffs aren't inflationary in a way that the Fed has to address, that the only problem is if there's weakness in the labor market. So Trump's going to win this argument because the Fed knows that he's
a very good Fed watcher. That's my experience. By the way, you have a 2.4% CPI. You don't need a 4.5% federal funds rate, 200 basis points above the CPI. You do not. And the CPI is trending down. I'm not saying the Fed is as tight as it was in the early 1980s, but they're very tight right now. And they're too tight. Anyway, I got to go. John Carney, Taylor Riggs, and the Palace of Versailles. You can catch Taylor along with their co-hosts Brian Brenberg, David McDowell, and Jackie DeAngelis on The Big Money Show. Weekdays noon to 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fabulous Fox Business. You can also read John Carney every day on Breitbart's Business Digest.